Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to break down dense material and pull out the core ideas you need. Today it's chapter 26 from the Feynman Lectures on Physics. We're tackling optics and this really fundamental concept, the principle of least time. It ties together geometry, how fast light moves, and, well, time itself.
Right, so our goal here is to get a solid grip on this idea quickly. It's not immediately obvious, this principle, but we want to understand how light bounces and bends, keeping that intuitive Feynman style, making sense of it.
Absolutely. And just to set the stage right from the chapter's perspective, we need to be clear we're working within what's called the geometrical optics approximation.
Okay, geometrical optics, what does that mean in practice?
It means we're basically thinking of light as traveling in straight lines, like rays, simple beams. It's an approximation, yeah, but a really good one, as long as the wavelengths of the light is much, much smaller than the things it's interacting with, the mirrors, lenses, opening, stuff like that. Got it. So ray tracing, essentially. Before we jump into the why, the principle itself, let's cover the what's. What were the known rules for how light behaves? The classical laws.
Well, the simplest one is reflection. We all know this one. Light hits something smooth, like a mirror.
It bounces off.
Right. And the geometry is really straightforward. If you measure the angle it comes in at relative to a line perpendicular to the surface, the normal, it leaves at the exact same angle.
Angle of incidence equals angle of reflection. Simple. Seems intuitive enough.
Exactly. But then things get a bit trickier with refraction.
Refraction.
Yeah.
That's the bending, right? Like when you stick a straw in a glass of water and it looks broken.
Precisely. Light bends when it goes from one substance, like air, into another, like water or glass. And people knew this for ages. The ancient Greeks, Ptolemy, they observed it, measured it.
But they couldn't nail down the rule. Why was it so tough?
Because the relationship isn't just a simple proportion. It's not linear. They had the data, they saw the bending, but finding a consistent mathematical formula connecting the incoming angle to the outgoing angle, that eluded them.
So they knew that it bent, but not the exact how.
Right. Until Wilbur Snell came along around 1621, he found the quantitative rule purely through experiments. We now call it Snell's law.
Okay, so what did Snell's law actually say? What's the relationship he found?
He found that if you take the sine of the angle in the first medium, say, air, and divide it by the sine of the angle in the second medium, water, that ratio is always the same constant value for those two specific materials.
So sine of angle 1 over sine of angle 2 equals some constant number?
Exactly. Equation 26.2 in the text, if you're following along. It worked beautifully, predicted how light would bend. But, and this is key, it was just an empirical rule, an observation. There was no underlying reason given for why light should follow this specific sign relationship.
Okay. So we've got these rules, reflection and refraction. One simple, one based on this sign law, but no deeper explanation. That's where Fermat comes in, right? This is the big shift.
This is the leap. Around the 1650s, Pierre de Fermat proposed something completely different, he said. Forget the specific angles for a moment. Light, when traveling between any 2 points, will always take the path that requires the shortest time.
Whoa, okay. Shortest time, not shortest distance.
Shortest time, that's the crucial difference.
But wait, that sounds weird. It almost sounds like the light beam has to, survey all possible paths beforehand, figure out which one is quickest, and then take that one. Doesn't that violate our usual idea of cause and effect happening right here, right now?
It absolutely does feel counterintuitive. It seems teleological, like the light knows its destination and the optimal route in advance. And yeah, that bumps up against classical physics ideas. It's a shift from local interactions determining the path to a kind of global optimization principle.
So how does this shortest time idea actually explain the laws we already knew? Let's start with reflection. Okay, for reflection, imagine light going from point A, bouncing off a mirror, to point B. The speed of light isn't changing. So the shortest time path is also the shortest distance path in this case.
Right.
And if you think about the geometry, the only point on the mirror where the total distance, A to mirror plus mirror to B, is minimized is precisely the point where the angle of incidence equals the angle of reflection. If you try any other point on the mirror, the total path length gets longer.
Ah, I see. So the old law just falls out naturally from minimizing the travel time, which in this case is the same as minimizing distance.
Exactly. The real power, the real test, though, was applying it to refraction.
Right.
Because there, the speed does change.
Right. Air to water, the speed is different. This is where that lifeguard analogy comes in, isn't it? Feynman uses it, and it's brilliant.
It really is the perfect way to get the intuition. Imagine you're a lifeguard on the beach. That's medium 1, where you can run fast. Someone's drowning out in the water medium 2 where you swim much slower.
Okay, got it. Beach, fast. Water, slow.
Your goal is to get to the person in the absolute minimum time. Would you run in a perfectly straight line towards them?
No. Because most of that straight line would be in the water where I'm slow. I'd waste too much time swimming.
Precisely. To save time, you'd instinctively run further along the beach, the fast medium, and then enter the water at a steeper angle, taking a shorter path through the slow medium.
Yeah, you'd optimize. Spend more time where you're fast, less where you're slow, even if the total path looks bent.
That's exactly what light does, according to Fermat. It chooses the path that minimizes the total travel time across the boundary between two media with different speeds.
So light is basically like that clever lifeguard figuring out the quickest route.
You got it. And here's the mathematical punchline. When you actually do the calculus, find the path where the total time is minimized, the condition you arrive at is exactly Snell's law.
No way.
Yes. Minimizing the time mathematically requires that the sine of the angle in medium 1 divided by the sine of the angle in medium 2 must be equal to the speed of light in medium 1 divided by the speed of light in medium 2.
So sine theta 1, sine
Yeah.
theta 2 equal V1, V2.
That's it. So the constant that Snell found experimentally, Fermat's principle reveals what it physically is. It's the ratio of the light speeds in the two materials.
Wow. Okay, that connects everything. The geometry, the time, the speed, and it all clicks together.
It really does. And this then leads directly to defining the index of refraction, usually written as n. It's defined as the speed of light in a vacuum, c, divided by the speed of light in the medium, v. So n equals cv.
And because Snell's law works, and it's linked to the speed ratio via Fermat's principle, this tells us something important about how speed changes in different materials, right?
Critically important, it forces the conclusion that light must travel slower in denser media like water or glass, which have a higher index of refraction than it does in air or vacuum, which have an index close to 1.
And that was a big deal, wasn't it? A testable prediction. Did it contradict older ideas?
It did. Some earlier theories had assumed light might travel faster in denser stuff. Fermat's principle made a clear opposite prediction based on time optimization, and experiments later confirmed light is slower in denser materials. It wasn't just explaining, it was predicting new physics.
Amazing. Okay, so Fermat's principle is powerful, but then Feynman adds a little twist, a refinement. It's not always strictly the least time.
Right, that's an important nuance he brings up in section 26-5. The more precise statement is that light takes a path where the time is stationary.
Stationary time, what does that mean if not least?
It means it's a path where if you were to vary it just a tiny, tiny bit, an infinitesimal nudge, the change in the total travel time would be 0, at least to a first approximation. Think calculus. The derivative of the time with respect to path variation is 0 at that point.
Okay, so like the bottom of valley is a minimum, the slope is 0 there.
Yeah.
But are there other possibilities?
Yes. It could also be a path of maximum time, like the crest of a hill, the slope is also 0 there. Or it could even be something like a saddle point, technically. The key mathematical feature is that small deviations don't change the time. It just happens that for most simple cases, like basic reflection and refraction, this stationary path is the minimum time path.
Okay, that makes sense. Stationary, not necessarily minimum. That feels more mathematically robust. And we actually see the effects of this time optimization principle all around us.
Oh, definitely. Think about looking at the sunset. Why does the sun look like it's still above the horizon even after it's technically dipped below?
Atmospheric refraction.
Exactly. The atmosphere's density changes with altitude, which means the speed of light changes. Light rays from the sun bend as they enter the denser air lower down, always following that path of least or stationary time. That bending makes the sun appear higher than it actually is.
And mirages, that shimmering water on a hot road.
Same principle. The air right near the hot road is much hotter and less dense than the air above it. Light travels faster in that hot, less dense layer. So a light ray coming from the sky towards your eye finds a quicker path by dipping down into that fast layer near the road and then bending sharply back up to your eye.
And our brain interprets that upward bending ray as if it came from a reflection on the ground. Hence, the illusion of water.
You got it. It's just light finding the fastest way through varying air densities.
What about technology? Lenses, mirrors, are they designed with this principle in mind?
Absolutely. Think about a perfectly focusing mirror, like a parabolic dish used for satellite TV or telescopes. Why that specific shape?
Geometry. to
Yeah.
make parallel rays converge.
Yes, but why does that geometry work? It's shaped precisely so that all parallel incoming rays, no matter where they hit the dish, take the exact same amount of time to travel from a plane perpendicular to the incoming rays to the focal point.
Oh, so it's enforcing equal travel time for all the rays.
Exactly. Whether a ray hits the center or the edge of the dish, the path length and any changes in medium ensure the travel time to the focus is identical. That's what creates a sharp focus. If the times were different, the image would be smeared out. Same idea applies to well-designed lenses.
Okay, this is really powerful, but it still leaves that nagging question. How does the light know? How does it explore these paths? This brings us to the edge of classical physics, doesn't it? Into quantum mechanics.
It really does. Feynman addresses this in the final section, 26-6. He stresses that this whole geometrical optics, ray tracing, least time principle, it's ultimately an approximation of a deeper reality,
Which is?
which is quantum electrodynamics, QED. In reality, a particle of light doesn't just take one path from point A to point B. It actually explores all possible paths simultaneously.
All paths, like even ridiculously curvy zigzag paths.
Yeah, every conceivable path. And for each path, quantum mechanics assigns a little rotating arrow, a complex number called a probability amplitude. The direction this arrow points depends on the time taken along that specific path.
Okay, so countless paths, each with an arrow spinning based on its travel time. How does that lead to a single path we observe?
Here's the magic. For paths that are wildly different from the stationary time path, their travel times will also be wildly different. This means their little arrows will end up pointing in all sorts of random directions. When you add up all those randomly pointing arrows,
They cancel each other out.
they almost perfectly cancel out destructive interference, but
Hmm.
for paths that are very close to the path of stationary time, the one Fermat's principle picks out, their travel times are almost identical.
Meaning they're arrows.
Their arrows end up pointing in nearly the same direction. So when you add those arrows together, they reinforce each other massively, constructive interference.
Ah. So the path we actually see light take the straight line, the Snell's law path, is simply the result of all the other possibilities canceling themselves out, leaving only the reinforced contributions from the paths clustered around the one with stationary time.
That's the quantum explanation, beautifully summarized. The classical laws emerge because the quantum probabilities overwhelmingly favor the path of stationary time. It's a statistical outcome of the photon sampling all histories.
So wrapping this up then, what's the core takeaway from this chapter? We started with simple reflection, moved to Snell's law for refraction, saw how Fermat's principle of stationary time explained why those laws work by connecting them to the speed of light,
Defining the index of refraction, NOECV.
making testable predictions, explaining atmospheric effects and mirages, understanding lens design.
And finally, connecting it all back to the fundamental quantum idea that light explores all paths, but only the ones near stationary time reinforce each other.
It seems the big idea is the shift in perspective.
Hmm.
Instead of just cause and effect, physics, at least in optics, seems to operate on this principle of optimization, finding the most efficient path in terms of time.
That's a fantastic way to put it. Fermat's principle is this powerful non-causal perspective. It doesn't ask what force pushed the light this way. It asks, given the start and end points and the speeds along the way, what path minimized or stationed the travel time? Nature seems to calculate the optimal route.
A really profound concept to chew on physics as optimization. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Feynman's take on light, time, and the path chosen.